Okay, and we're back, and it is COMP2068, and it's week 5, lesson 5, part 1 of the winter 2016 semester at Georgian. So I want to talk about Gulp automation today, and I've kind of put together a Gulp automation today, and I've kind of put together this. Thank you. This little tutorial for you that we're going to do today. I have up on GitHub for you to check out. Under Georgian College, I want you to download, or actually, we're going to look at this thing called TypeScript Gulp, right? So I'm going to make Gulp, I'm going to use Gulp to transpile our TypeScript, because one of the challenges we have a lot is we can't transpile anything, right? We can't without doing Command-Shift-B, Control-Shift-B. It doesn't work properly, right? So I have this little project that I put together, and now don't worry about what it is, like that I'm transpiling here. I've got a little person.js file. Let me take a look at what it is here. Here's a person.js file. And what I want to do with this person.js file is I want to transpile it, convert it from TypeScript into JavaScript, and I want to do it every time I save. As I save, it transpiles automatically. If I change a website, like an HTML page, it reloads my browser. If I change my CSS files, it reloads my browser. Any change that I make to my files, it reloads my stuff, which is kind of cool, right, to do. So it's going to be a bit of time. So there's a bit of a lab I put together. It's called Gulp Automation. It's due by Friday at midnight, right, this Friday. And I kind of referenced this Georgian College TypeScript Gulp that you can use as a reference to get your stuff set up. I fully expect you guys to be done by the end of today. And I want you to call your project, oh, this is wrong. I want you to call your project, what did I call it here? COMP2068. That's what I want you to call it when you upload it, Lab 4. All right, so that's what I want you to name your project. Okay, so let's start this thing off. And I'm going to start it with you guys from your perspective. So I want to build in some automation, right? But I want to do it with the express generator, because it makes sense for me to use the express generator, right? Because that's what we're learning. We're learning about express and about the express generator. I'm just going to make a person class. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I made that as an example. We need to do this express generator stuff. So let's do a couple things. Let's start off a brand new folder here. I'm going to right-click new folder. So join me in doing this, right? And we're going to call this thing COMP2068. And we're going to call this thing, again, it's going to be called Lab 4, right? So right away, you're ready to go. This is what you're going to hand in. So you're doing your lab with me as we go, all right? Okay, and this is going to take the place of your little tests. So there's not a test today. It's a lab that you have to do, and it's going to be due by Friday. Okay, so let's see how we're going to do this. So remember, whenever we do the express generator, what's the first thing I do? Lucy, what do I do? I make my COMP2068 Lab 4 the container for my express generator. How do I do it? Hold on. So command prompt, and you want me to go here, in here? So I'm going to go CD. I'm going to drag this in here, right? Just drag this right in here, and then press enter. Okay, I'm in there. Okay, now what? Now what do I do? You have to assume that express generator is installed. So assume that. So what's next? You tell me what to do. Express, yeah, that's right. That's correct. Oh, I can type. How about express minus E? Okay, is that good? Are we good? Express E. Minus E stands for EJS, right? Okay, so press enter. And it says, hey, we're going to put this, we're going to use this file here for your express. Am I done? Do I have to do anything here? Can I run my file now? No, what do I need to do? npm install. So npm install, right? Which installs everything locally, right? So it takes my stuff. Now I've got my express running. It's ready to go, right? And again, you've seen this once, really, right? Last week. So I want you to see it again, and that's why I'm giving you a couple days extension, because I got some feedback back like, I still don't quite understand how to use Express and to make my portfolio site, right? That's why I'm showing you this again. Okay, so I've got this thing here, and I want to point to it with my Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to drag and drop it over here like this, right? Now I'm going to go a little bit faster than normal because I want to get this done, and I don't want to spend the entire time together doing the Gulp stuff, right? All right, so I got a bunch of stuff. I told you last time I've got this bin folder that I wanted to discard. It will not work properly every single time with Azure and with Heroku. I need to expose a server.js file on the root of my folder. In order for me to do that, I got to drag out the www onto the root of my folder here and rename it so that it says server.js. That's the first thing I need to do. And then I got to change my require, which is require app. I got to get rid of one of these dots because dot slash stands for the what? What's the dot slash stand for? Yes. No. Dot slash stands for that. What's dot slash stand for? Current directory or root. All right. So if you're in the current directory, in this particular case, is the root. It's going to look at the current directory. And by the way, the dot forward slash is the most compatible way of indicating that it's on the same level. All right. There's other ways you can use too, but if you use the dot forward slash across different servers and different browsers, you're going to have more compatibility, less compatibility problems. Okay, so that's what we did here. That's one change, and so we've changed to server.js. We want to kill this bin folder, so we don't need this anymore. And we need to make one more change to this thing before we put it up on GitHub. I want to go to my package.json file and put this all lowercase. That's for sure. So COMP2068 lab 4. Lab 4, it's required. And this start, see where it says start here? That's ugly, right? That can't be. Start can't be node www or whatever. It's got to be node server.js, right? Because it's got to point to that. You've got to tell Azure, right, what to look for, okay? Now all these are the dependencies right now that are included in my module, the stuff that we're doing together, right? So this is it. It's private is true, scripts. How about things like, can I also add in stuff like my repository? Is there another line in here that I can put in for repository? If you don't know what you can add into my package.json, if I start typing repo, right? Look, I have the ability for me to put in repository, right? And it gives me this little space. One of them is, right? What other things can I do here? If I press Control Space, I have two things: type and URL. I want to specify those things. So type, right, is what? Git, right? And URL, right, is the URL, right? So if I go URL, there it is. What's my URL? I don't have that yet, but I'm going to. And it's probably going to be, if I go up online for a second, just to preview what it's going to be, I'm probably going to put it up on Georgian College, right? And I'm probably going to call it, well, let's just do it. I'm probably going to call it COMP2068 Lab 4, right? That's what I want to call it because I want to finish your lab with you today, right? Get it done. Get her done, in other words, right? So here's my link. I'm going to copy this whole thing, and I'm going to go back into my Visual Studio and plop it in there, right? So there's Lab 4. So I've got all that ready. Do I have to do this in my package.json? No. But it's really good practice to put your stuff in here. The other thing I need to know is who's the author. That's the other thing that a lot of times what your package.json looks for. So if I press Control Space and I look at author, that's another thing that your package.json can ask for. So author, and that's usually me. So and I can go Tom or whatever your name is, right? Should go there, right? And you can also put other things in here like description. Like what's this thing about, right? So description, right? And the description of your little, of your package, your node package that you're building, right? So this is, you know, COMP2068 Lab 4, right? So this is project for COMP2068 Lab 4. And you can go and do more details here. And also, a lot of times we have something called license, right? So you can also look that up too. So if I go license, I'm going to just choose MIT license, right? So you can choose ISC, MIT, something, right? So I'm just trying to show you that you can modify your package.json. We didn't kind of show this last time, but I want to show you that it detects nicely here in JavaScript and in Visual Studio Code. It's nice. It works nicely together. Let me save my server.js file. So here I'm back to my package.json. Okay, cool. A couple things I want to do for this thing here. Notice that we have dependencies. And I want to start using Gulp. Gulp is a node module, right? That's what it is. And if you look online to see what that is, if I look to see that, so here if I just type in, actually I've got it already. If I go to gulp.js, right, it looks like this. And if I go to docs, it tells you how to download and install. In order for you to use Gulp, you need to do this: npm install --g instead of global gulp-CLI. You need this piece first. So that on the global scope, this installs gulp CLI. You all need to do that. Okay, whether you're using gulp, or not. If you want to use gulp on the command line, you need to put this in, because otherwise on the command line, gulp will not work. It'll only work within your code, right? This is one for you, man. This is going to automate your TypeScript, turn it into JavaScript in Cloud 9, right? So this was, you're late, but this is for you, really. Because I know you're a Cloud 9 guy. Okay, so please do this. Please do this first line. You need this line. Now here's something. The next line says, hey, let's put in --save -dev. What's that? You're going to see that a lot. What's this -dev thing? Oh? Someone said something? Ari, what do you think it is? It's development dependencies. So look at your dependencies here in your package.json. You have dependencies. There's not a section here for development dependencies, but what's the difference between a development dependency and a project dependency? What's the difference? Take a guess if you don't know. Yeah.
Development dependency you're only using when you're building a website. Once it's finished,
you don't need it anymore, right? So development dependencies is stuff that I'm building. I'm using to build. Like for example, would TypeScript be a project dependency or a development dependency typically? Depending on, it depends actually. The answer is it depends, right? In our environment, it's yes. It would be a development dependency, not a project dependency. We don't depend on TypeScript to be there in order for us to build Express, right? An Express website. We like it because, hopefully you do, because it gives you code hinting and helps you out, right? That's what it's supposed to be. But it's not required. Okay, so going back to the command line, if I go back to what it says here, type in this, no npm install --save -dev, right? So we're going to, by the way, we're doing a lab 4, if you want to look at up on Blackboard and give you the details. Okay, so I'm going to go in here to my terminal, and I'm going to clear the screen, and clear for Mac users and Linux users, and CLS for Windows people, right? And I'm going to type that in. So I'm going to type npm install -g gulp-CLI, and that's the one that you need to install gulp on the command line. So put that in. And then when that's done, do this. So npm install --save -dev, so development dependency, right, for gulp, and press enter. So what this is going to do is going to go out and grab gulp, and it's going to load it inside my project, right? So I'm going to have gulp now in my project, as well as the ability for me to use gulp on the command line. Gulp is big. It comes with a lot of other sub-dependencies, as you can see, right? Okay, so we've got gulp. Cool, cool. And we got a bunch of other modules here. In order for me to use gulp, take a look now. We have a dev dependency, right, now in my package.json called gulp, right? In order for me to use gulp, right, I need a gulp file.js on the root of your folder, right? So let's go to the root of the folder here and right-click, new file. We'll call this gulp file.js. So what is gulp? Gulp is a task automator. We create tasks with gulp. We define tasks, JavaScript functions. Runner for transpiling our tasks in Visual Studio Code by pressing Control-Shift-B or Command-Shift-B on the Mac. So too can we define tasks that we can run on the command line, right? So we can do different things. For example, compress all of our JavaScript files. That could be a task, right? Or compress all of our image files. Or transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. That's a really useful thing to do, right? Okay. In order for me to use gulp, I need to use the same syntax that I normally would have in my app.js. See how we have app.js, we have this var, express is equal to require, and so on. You need this kind of syntax for gulp too, but it's a separate kind of process altogether. And it's going to be separate from our server. It's not going to be part of our server. It's not required for our server to run. And therefore, it's a development dependency, not a project dependency. If I don't have my gulp file.js and I want to automate and send it up to, or I send it up to Azure, it's going to work. It's only for us here locally that we need this stuff. Okay. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say var gulp. Type this with me. Is equal to require gulp. Right. That's the first thing you need. Well, you know what? What if I don't know anything about gulp? And you know what? I'm trying to get this done so you guys can have some automation, right? And also some code hinting for JavaScript and TypeScript, right? But I don't necessarily want to translate all my JavaScript files into TypeScript because it's the dog's breakfast right now for my Express. Express is hard to translate. There's a lot of work I got to do to make Express work with TypeScript from the get-go, right? Without having errors, is what I'm saying, right? So the right thing to do is go back into the terminal window, clear it, and then install TSD like we did last time. So I'm going to say npm install. And what I want to do is I want to do a couple things. I would install TypeScript, right? But I want to install TypeScript, first of all, as a development dependency inside your project. That's different than installing TypeScript globally. If I install it as a development dependency in my project, that means if I want to run TypeScript, I can write it in. I can run it in on Cloud9. I can run it anywhere else, and it's going to run my version of TypeScript when I'm inside my folder before it runs the global version of TypeScript. Okay, so I'm going to go -- save -dev, and now TypeScript becomes a development dependency inside my project. Okay, there it is, 1.75. Okay, cool, that's one. The next thing I want to do is I want to start loading some of these typings like we normally do for TypeScript to give us code hinting, right? But I don't want to write any TS files yet. Just see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go TSD install. And what do I want to include? Well, definitely Node, probably Express, right? Because I want to include those things. And some other modules we'll add in later. Definitely Gulp, right? I want that in there as well, right? And I want to press -- save. And what this is going to do when I put TSD goes to the type definition libraries out there and installs everything inside the typings folder. Press enter. It's going to go out there, grab those files, and then it grabs Express, it grabs Gulp, it grabs MIME, it grabs Node, it grabs a bunch of other stuff, and puts it in here. And it creates a typings folder in here for me too. Here it is. Well, what does this do? What it does is if I hover over Gulp now, right, it detects it as Gulp, right? And if I do one of this, right, if I say Gulp dot, I get all my code hinting here. This is the stuff I wanted in JavaScript, but without using TypeScript, right? It's not going to give me code coloring and syntax errors. It won't do that for me because I'm not using TypeScript, but it'll give me code hinting, right? Which is what I want, right? So from 0 code hinting, now I got code hinting for all of Node and Express. That's like superpower, right? Okay, so whenever I define a Gulp task, I got to use the following syntax. Gulp task, open bracket, the name of the task, right? So let's call this task example, right? Here's the example task. Then, right, any task dependencies, any prior task dependencies, right? Okay, and I'm first going to write it inside of an anonymous function. Here's an anonymous function that I'm going to use, which is going to act as a callback function, right? So this anonymous function is going to run when I call the example task. That's what's going to happen, all right? And to show you that, if I want to do a I want to show what's happening here, there's another little npm module that I can load up to give me some additional tool sets. Before I go into this example task, let's go back into my terminal for a second and clear the screen. And I want to add in one more npm module to help us out. It's going to be npm install, right, -- save -dev gulp-util, and press enter. Gulp-util. It's a utility package that's for Gulp as well, right? You're going to say, what the hell, Tom? What do I need all this stuff? Why are you wasting my time, right? You'll see. Okay, if that's the case, I might as well include some of my code hinting too. So let's add that into the TSD. So TSD install, right? -- save gulp-util. Notice how it's very similar. And by the way, so is Bower. Bower, Gulp, all of it is very similar in terms of the way, and notice how I couldn't find it, gulp-util. So TSD install, if I go gulp-util, it's kind of worked before, but let's try this out, see if it's the right way of doing it. There it is, gulp-util this way. I have to write the -- save at the end of my TSD. Notice how I included a bunch of other stuff here, some other typings. Here's typings, right? A bunch of typings now, extra stuff, right? And in my tsd.d.ts file, which is inside my typings, right, I have a bunch of reference paths that I don't have to worry about. Cool. Let's go back to my gulpfile.js. I need another variable for my gulputil, and I'm just going to call it gutil. So var gutil is equal to require gulp-util. What does require do again? Tyler, what does require do again? Come on, take a guess. What does require do? What would you say require does in your own words? Was that? It does make it necessary, but it does something else. Okay, I'm going to ask some other people over here. I'm going to point to somebody. What does require do? What does require do? Take a guess. I want you to guess what require does, because eventually I'll ask you this on the test, right? So what does require do? It doesn't just require. Requires one of the things. What it says, like it requires it, is one thing. It does something else too. What does it do? Just guess. Just guess. Just use your own words. Don't worry about it. What do you think it does?
It looks for whatever.
Looks for. But that's the kind of way to require. How about this? Everything that is gulp in the first line, on line 1, when I say var gulp is equal to require gulp, everything that gulp is, the whole class and its entire namespace, is represented by gulp now. That's what it means. So not only do I require it, because I just put require by itself on a line, right? But when I go var gulp is equal to, what I'm doing is saying, hey, I have this alias that I've made called gulp, like lowercase gulp, and it is now pointing to the whole require library. The gulp library that I've created from the npm library, the npm module, and the module comes with many methods, like the task method and the watch method. And once I do that, I can use gulp as an object that represents that library. Right? So it's not just a requirement; it also creates an object inside that variable. All right, I want you to think of it like that. So that means that's why I can do this. I can use the accessor methodology to access a method called task, right? That defines the task, which is called, we've named example. By the way, you can call this task anything you want. I'm just naming the example, and then a function, this anonymous function that's going to be called as soon as I've called my task. So this callback function, that's what they're called, right? Immediately executes upon calling this task example. That's what happens, okay? I could also write this as a named function that I access from this task. So I can say gulp example is and then comma and then whatever my name function is called, and I can call that name function that way too. But this is a good method to use, okay? So I want to use my gutil. Let's try gutil here, and because I've got my code hinting, if I press dot, it allows me to do something like log, right? gutil log, and I want to send a message to the log that says running example task, if I can spell. Well, bear with me while we do this together and when we learn each example. So I've got my task, right, ready to go. How do I run this task? I go back to my terminal, right? Here's my terminal, and I'm just like, let's just tighten this up a little bit so you don't need this all. Here's my terminal so you can see it side by side. And I'm going to do clear, just so I give you some more room. I'm going to do gulp example. I can type. Typing is terrible today. And when I do that, it does this. It says running example task. There's my output, right? The same thing that I put here, it's going to output. So I can call a task almost like a function, a named function I'm really calling from my command line. That's powerful. That's huge. And I can do anything in there, anything I want, right? Okay. So that's kind of first thing that I want to do with you. Any questions around tasks? So I can define a task, and I'm using TypeScript, not because I want to create TypeScript files, but purely for code hinting. And that's good because if I go back to some of my other files that I got here in Express to help you with Express, if I go to my app.js now, and if I hover over things like app, right, I get that app is of type Express, right, because I've got code hinting. And if I go over here, it gives me the whole thing for set, which I wouldn't normally get with pure JavaScript, right? It's going to give me a whole, this app.set returns, what it's listing for, the whole thing, right? But there's some other stuff in here as an example. Like, for example, I've got path, right? If I hover over path, it says type of path is type of path, right? And if I look at path join, right, it gives me, because it's a built-in node module, right, it gives me all the details. I don't have to load a TSD, a type definition library for path, because path is built into node. Just FYI, right? It's one of the built-in modules, right? I just have to call path. Favicon, you know what? Did you guys use, who used the favicon in their Express website? Anybody? You did? You uncommented and you pointed to it, right? Okay. But what if I don't want one? I don't want a favicon right now, right? I don't have to have one. I can just, and if I don't have one, why would I include or require, right, this favicon module? I can just undo that. I can just kind of unbind that, right? Here's Morgan and cookie parser. And notice I don't get the same kind of code hinting because it says any. Why? I don't have the type definition libraries. Let's add them in. Let's add Morgan, cookie parser, and body parser. And I'll do this inline. So I'm going to kind of do one of these. Hold on a second so you can see it. This is huge when it comes to code hinting. I know you guys don't like, who cares, Tom? But you know, I don't care about getting code hinting. I just look at examples online, you know, and then just drag and drop or copy paste, right? But it's important to know if you want to do something neat or new. You can't do that kind of stuff so often, right? So let's go TSD install, right? And we're going to go Morgan, if we can find that, -- save. And let's see if Morgan exists. And go out to the web, find Morgan. It exists. Okay, let's do the next one. TSD install, just in order, right? Cookie parser, right? -- save. So cookie parser goes out to the web, grabs cookie parser, installs it. All right, TSD install, right? And then we're going to find body parser, right? So body dash parser, right? -- save. Go out to the web, grab it, install it. Okay, good. Now that I have that, if I hover over logger, it doesn't say any anymore. It says type of Morgan, right? And I get more stuff. Cookie parser and body parser. Every time I look at something now, it means something. There's expressive meaning to all these things. So that way, when I want to do routes, any kind of routing later on, it's going to give me code hinting on how to build routes, which is one of the challenges we all have when we first use this new structure that we got here, right? Okay, cool. So that's pretty cool. All right, but what if I do have some kind of custom class that I want to use? For example, I want to make an error class, right? Because if you notice down here, right, I have this error status, and it says any. What does that mean? It means that there is no status. It doesn't belong to the error class. And that's an error. That is a mistake that they've kind of put together. In JavaScript, because JavaScript is so dynamic, you can add properties to a class or an object by just creating them, like saying error status is equal to. When I do that, all of a sudden that object has that property. That's JavaScript, right? You don't have to declare it. Even if it didn't have it before in the class, now it does, right? TypeScript hates that stuff, right? So if I was ever to make this file app.js into an app.ts, I'd have to create a new error class somehow, right? And extend the error class that this is running from. Notice that if I hover over error, right, it says error is an express request. Okay, that's what this is, right? And if I go to error status, error is an express request, right? It's not an error. And there is no, here's an error. Error is a class, right? New error constructor, right? And notice how if I run over this, error status 44, well, there is no error status, right? So instead of doing this, when I use app use and I create my new error, I need to make my own class, right, of error. I'm just letting you know. So before I convert this monster here that you see into TypeScript, and you see an error, I know about it, all right? Don't be afraid. We're going to fix it. But it takes a fix to make. And I'm going to do this because when I transpile, every time I transpile, I want this thing here to convert, right? Every time I transpile my stuff. I need to have something to transpile to, otherwise my transpile that I'm going to make, it's not going to matter to you guys, right? All right, so let's do this thing. So let's convert this thing into a TS file for the first time. So now you don't have to do this in real life. We can just use the TSD file to give us code hinting and continue on with Express. But we're doing this as an example of how you can incorporate your TypeScript into your code. All right, so I'm going to right click here and I'm going to rename. And I'm going to call this TS. Immediately we got some problems, right? All of these are problems. Why? Why are these problems immediately? First of all, let me save this and come out of this file, right? So I'm going to come out of this file for a second and go back to this file. All right, so notice that I know I have my node modules for all these things, for Express, for all this stuff. I have it all in here. But somehow it's not working. Why is that? What was that? Louder, louder, louder. Tell me, Lucy, be strong and confident. You know, like the strong, confident person you are. Tell me.
You are import. You have to put import instead.
I could put import. That's one thing I could do. Import fixes some problems in TypeScript. If I go import here, right? So if I go import, that fixes some problems, but it doesn't fix this problem. Why am I still getting this problem? Anyone else? I could. Anyone else? Anywhere else? I don't want to always look at these two ladies in front of me because the people in front of me I can always attack because they're right here, right? So
TS comp.
keep going. You got right.
So
I need a
TS comp.
some kind of TS config file. I don't have any of that. I don't know how to transpile my stuff, right? So how do I do that? That's the first thing I do. So I'm going to make a new file here, new file, and we need a TS config.json file to tell TypeScript how to transpile stuff, right? I'm going to create a space for it. And if I press Control Space and go compiler options, what I want to add in is a target, which is ES5, right? And I also want to have a module, right, which is common.js. And I also want to kind of set up source maps, right? Source maps are true. I want to have that. That's something I'm missing, right? I'm not going to transpile by pressing Control-Shift-B, all right, or Command-Shift-B. I'm going to make a task runner to do that. So that's one of the pieces that I'm missing. What else is causing me to have these errors? I have another reason for these errors. Come on, guys. How about the smart guys in the back? I'm going to have to start pointing at people in the back, right? All right. How about the girl in green right here? The girl in green. What's your name? Okay. Tell me what it is. What's the reason why I'm getting errors in my app.ts? What? Where do they go? Well, she was right. Lucy was right, right? But here's the way to prevent those things from happening, just in case you get those errors and you don't have a tsconfig.json file, which you don't really require necessarily, right? One of the ways to fix this is to add in a reference to the tsd.d.ts file, right? And you want to do that right here, right, in your app.js. So I can do that now. It's going to be in typings, right? So I'm going to go like this, // and I'm going to get reference path. And that's equal to, right, and the path where it is, which is, now remember my dot slash, right, typings, and / tsd.d.ts, like this, and that'll go away. So that gives me some, I make sure that I reference that file right away. Anytime I do any kind of TypeScript, I want to reference all my typings, right? So just in case, just to make sure that it's doing that, I do this. But this is a problem, and the reason why I always create an _ reference.ts file is because maybe I'm going to have my own classes, like I'm going to have right now, that's going to handle my error. I want to make an error class, right? And if that's the case, I don't want to mess with my tsd.d.ts file because I'm going to add other TypeScript definitions in here maybe, right? So I don't want that. So this is a good start if you're not going to do anything but use the stuff that exists. But if I want to make my own, which is chances are if you're using TypeScript, you're going to use the class features of TypeScript too, right? That's one of the things I need to do. I need to go in here and create a new file on the root called, and this is what I would recommend, reference.ts, right? And in my reference.ts file, I want to take that file, right? So I can just go in here and grab this path and put it back into my reference.ts file. And that's all it's going to have right now, just a reference to typings. And then inside my app.ts, I'm going to change this reference to typings, and I'm going to make a reference to my reference file, which is going to look like _ reference.ts. Notice how I use the // What's the / again? Anything on the root. That's the proper syntax to be cross-browser, cross-server compatible. Please use that all the time. And if you see it in a book and you don't understand why that is, this is what it is. All right? So it just points to something that's on the same level. Okay, and notice that it does that here too. Right? Here's your // roots, // roots. right? That means on the same level, look at the roots folder, and then at the index file, index.js. Okay, cool. So I've done this. All right. I want to create a new class, right? And I want to create it in a somewhere where I can hold my folder, my files and folders, and I want to make it so that it's on my server, right? And if you notice, things are getting pretty hairy here, right? I've got my typings, I've got my views, I've got my routes, and I've got my public folder. And you know what? I want to encapsulate all my stuff, other than my server.js. I want to take all these other pieces and put them somewhere else. I want to put them inside a server folder. Let's do that. That's kind of the challenge people have. How do I rejig my server folder so that everything points at the right places, right? What would you say? How would I do it? Well, I mean, obviously, I want to make a new folder called server. So there's my server folder. That's the first thing I'd like to try and do, right? I can't just drag and drop. I'm going to have all kinds of crazy errors, right, if I do this. And my question to you is, should I put my typings inside my server folder? Because typings is a development dependency. It's not a project dependency. So maybe, I don't know about typings. Definitely not gulp file. That's not going to go. It has to be on the root. And I have to keep server.js on the root. But everything else pretty much, well, other than tsconfig and tst.json, all these configuration files, they need to stay outside here, over here for now, right? Okay, but the rest, routes, right, views, and even app.ts, that can all go under server, right? So let's do that. Let's see if we can break this thing even better, right, than we're breaking it right now. So I'm going to take app.ts, and I'm going to drag and drop into my server folder. Okay, good. I need also my server.js has to stay there, my package.json, everything else, my typing, my views, that's got to go under server too. And so does my routes. Okay, now I have a bit of a slimmer kind of thing that looks like this. Okay, we got some problems. When I look at my app.ts now, there is no reference path on the same thing, so I got to take my reference.ts and put that inside my server as well. Yay, that's cool. But my reference.ts doesn't look at the right thing. It's got to go up one to the root and down into typing. So this is going to be a double dot. Okay. My server.js doesn't look at the right thing. My server.js is looking at the same level for app, but it's not going to find it. It's got to go down into server and then app. So server, app, right? You're with me. I'm rejigging some of these files, right? Gulp file can say the same. That's not going to affect anything. Package.json, that's not going to affect anything. tsconfig.json, that's not going to affect anything. tst.json, that's not going to affect anything. These are all good, right? But how about my app.ts, right? My app.ts, is that going to affect anything? So here's my app.ts. It's looking at the same level for routes. Well, that's good. We're good, right? That's okay. I'm looking at the same level for views. That's okay. How about, though, this public folder? That's a problem, right? Is public, it's looking at the directory name and looking at public, right? This public, which exists now up a step, right, from where it was before. So that might break us. And we'll see. Let's leave it as is for now. Trust me, right? We'll see how this works out. Now I've got this error. I got a finicky error. I got to take care of the status 404, right? And I want to make, in the server space, I want to make a new, my new class that I'm going to use. I'm going to create my own class, and it's going to be my own error class, my custom error class. And my custom error class is going to live inside of an objects folder, right? Because I want to put it into my objects folder. So let's do that. So right-click inside my server, and I'm going to go new folder in my server folder, and we're going to call it objects. Yay. You can also call this config. There's many things you can call this thing. If you don't like objects, you can make it your own, right? In my objects folder, I'm going to make a new file, right, that I'm going to call, and again, I'm going to call this error, right, .ts. My new error class, my custom error class. I got to be careful, because if I just call it error, I can't make it the same name as my error class on the main namespace. It wouldn't be, right? But I'm just saying, it'll be my custom error class, and the only way I can access it is objects.error. That's what I want to do, right? My new objects.error class, or config.error, or something, whatever you want to call it. I need a new module, right? In my module, I want to call objects. This is TypeScript. In my module objects, right? My module objects, I want to create a new class that I'm going to export, right? The class is going to be called error, just like before. Now remember, my namespace is okay because my namespace is objects. So even though there's an error class already, this isn't going to be the same error class. It's going to be objects.error. But this lends to us a problem, and I'll tell you right now. I could do this. I could set this up. But the problem is I want my class error to extend the error class. And it doesn't know what to look at. It's going to have a problem looking at, because it's going to think it's objects.error. And so that's not going to work, right? So I need to kind of give my error class its own little class. Let's call this thing, you know, server error as something else. That's a little bit different than what this is, right? So if I call this server error, the convention is that I need to rename my file so that it's also called server error. Let's rename it. Here we are, server error. Here's my server error file, right? There it is. Don't worry about what the little error is because I just renamed it. That's why it's giving me that error. And what I want to do here is I want to create my enclosure for this server error class, right? And by the way, if it says, man, this class objects.server error exists, it doesn't exist. It's just because I reloaded everything. All right, so just ignore that thing. I want to make a constructor for my server error, right? And I want it to call the superclass. The superclass is the error superclass that comes with Node.js. See? If I hover over error, it shows Node.js error constructor, right? So that's what I really want. Just to be safe, because I'm in my objects, I want to reference my typings, right? And I want to do this one time, right? So I want to kind of go out, // reference path. If I want to just, by the way, it's not going to hurt to do this. I want to go up one. So it's in objects, I go up to server. From server, I go up one more to typings and then down, right? So // up. I'm in server, // up. I'm now on the root, and then down into typings, and down into tsd.d.ts, just to reference that path. And if it's wrong, right? If it says, hey, Tom, you're wrong, it's probably because I mistyped something, right? There you go. This makes sure that I have access to all my other node modules and everything else. That's why I can go this. I can safely put this node, this error node in, right? Okay, here's something. How do I include, in regular TypeScript, I have an index.html to tie everything together. I don't have an index.html here to tie my TypeScript together, but I need to include it somehow. What is the name that I want to use? Tyler, we just said it earlier. I want to include my new class, right, into my app.js or app.ts. What do I use to include my custom class? Require, not gulp, but require this, objects, right? Require, and I want to require server error, right? That's what I want to do. So how do I do that? I'm going to go back. By the way, I don't have to do an export for the whole module. I'm already doing a module export here. So I'm going to go back to my app.ts, right? And it depends on where you want it. I can do it right at the top. I don't have to do just express first. I can say something like this. Import, let's do an import. Import and now again, this is tricky because I'm in app.ts and I want to go down to objects, right? So I'm going to go /objects/ server error, right? Server error, right? And if I want to put the TS in there, it's okay. So if it's got a problem, if it can't find objects server error, right? Server error, and it says file users. Take a look what it says. Thomas, blah 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 blah. It's not a module, right? Okay. What if I just use the var keyword? Can I do that? How do I include the stuff in here? And this is the right way to do it, right? So I'm requiring this. It's coming in as this server error. But I'm not getting any code hinting. if I want to use this server error stuff in here. All right, so we're going to change this back into an import later on. I want to be able to import my class somehow, right? Here's the other thing I can do, right? Because remember, I'm using TypeScript with Node, and I don't have anything to link things together, right? But I need to reference that module in order for it to be part of my namespace somehow, right? So I gotta look at this. I gotta see how am I gonna do this module import or whatever. But I want to first of all to fix all this problem that I have. I may not be seeing this thing because right now, you know, and I'm just gonna kind of save everything. So I'm gonna save all. I got some errors that I gotta take care of, right? And I'm gonna get rid of my server error.ts file, and I'm gonna go back to it for a second to see if I get my errors. I still get my error. What's going on here? Well, because I haven't transpiled, and now back to gulp. Right, I got a gulp. So instead of me going through and telling you what to grab, let's get going onto the website here, where I have my my example gulp file. So I'm going to go to GitHub. I'm going to go to Georgian College, and I'm going to go to TypeScript gulped. And underneath there, notice I have a gulp file.js, which is what we're going to be using here. And I'm just going to make this a little larger so you can see it. I need to include gulputil, gulp debug, gulp inject, gulp TypeScript, gulp source maps, and these lines here of code, right? All these things, including everything else, in order for me to make everything run properly. So for now, what I want you to do is go in here to this TypeScript gulp object, grab all this stuff, and put it in your gulp file, right? Go into your gulp file, and just replace it up here. Yay. What I need to do, though, is I need to install this stuff, because it's not installed yet. So I need to install gulp debug, gulp inject, gulp TypeScript, and so on. So let's do that on the command line. So I presented a problem. The problem is I can't transpile, and let's say I don't have access to Control-Shift-B or Command-Shift-B on the Mac, and I'm not using Visual Studio. I'm using brackets or your favorite editor. How do I do that? And this is what's going to do to help us, all right? That's why I'm doing it. Okay, so npm, let's do a clear. npm install gulp-debug, gulp-inject. I can do it pretty much all at once. Gulp-TypeScript, right? Gulp-source maps, gulp-connect, gulp-open, -save, -dev. These are all the other gulp modules. So in npm, I can use my node package manager to install multiple dependencies all at once, as opposed to me doing one line at a time. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll press the button. It's like me pressing like DEFCON 5, right? The missiles are going to be launched when I press the button. Okay, enter. So I'm going to go through there. It's going to grab my stuff. It's going to start going online, grabbing all the required modules, and loading them into my package.json file. Yay. Okay, I'm going to scroll up there. So for those people who didn't see it, you can see all the dependencies that just loaded in. Woo! Here it is right here. That's what I did, this one-liner. npm install gulp -debug, gulp or -inject, gulp-TypeScript, gulp-source maps, gulp-connect, and open, and then -save, -dev. And if that's good, that's one part. I want to get some code hinting on some of this stuff, and I know some of it's not available, because some of these modules are later modules that we don't have type definition libraries for. But if I want to grab some of them, I can do something like tsd install, right, gulp-debug. That'll work. And I know I can do a tsd install when that's done. tsd install gulp-inject, right? So get some code hinting for that too. We're not going to do inject today, but I want to set it up so we can go forward and use this stuff clear. And then tsd install gulp-TypeScript to help us out. -save. And I think I might be able to do source maps too. tsd install gulp-source maps, maybe. minus save. Sometimes there's certain ones that you can't get that worked. But the last two for sure, gulp connect and gulp open, you'll see I can't get them. If I go clear, GSD install, gulp dash connect getting an error, connect minus save. What does it say?
You have rate limit.
Because all of us are doing it at the same time. Guaranteed, right? And then if you do the same thing, TSD install, that didn't work. Gulp dash, I want to show you, gulp dash open minus save, that won't work either. So there's no results for those. But for the rest, I'm good, right? And if I look at my typings now, just to see what I've got, first of all, let's look at my tsd.json file. I should see something like this. Like there's lots and lots of stuff now that I got. TypeScript, source maps, all the stuff, right? And the same thing goes with my my typings. My typings is huge. I've got lots of typings. And under my tsd.d.ts file, I've got lots of these. That's why I never want to mess with my tsd.d.ts file. I'd rather reference it in a reference file. So worst case scenario, I have kind of a reference of the reference files. So I don't have all of this at the top of my files. Okay, cool. Okay, so I've got part of it. And let's talk about the other part. I'm going to go back online here. So I've got this piece. And let's take a look at this piece online. Okay, I'm doing this. I'm saying var TypeScript sources. And in this particular example, I'm looking at something called scripts TS. I don't have a scripts TS. I do have a typings file. And so I've got to rejig this folder so it looks at the right locations, right? Why do I need this? Because I'm always going to, I don't want to look at this path. I don't want to put this in over and over again. I want to type it in. I want to reference the path. I only want to type it one time. And that's why I'm making a variable for this. So let's grab this and modify it so it works for us. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to go back into our files. I'm going to go back into gulpfile.js. And let's get rid of this task, because this is a useless little task that we made. And just paste in the TypeScript sources. But this is wrong, right? Like, if you look at what it does, it says, okay, take a look at typings and go down a step for this. This path is correct. But I don't have a scripts. It's going to go somewhere else, like in objects. So it's going to go server objects. And this is where all of my TypeScript is going to be my custom classes. So let's do that. So I'm going to go, I want it to look at server, lowercase, server objects. So that's one of my places that I want it to look for my TypeScript files. Right, so that's my TypeScript sources. I don't have any HTML sources other than, as an example, I have my EJS files, right? And they're inside my views. So every time I go and change my view, my index.js file, that EJS file, I want to reload my page. For now, let's leave it as is, and let's just take care of one thing at a time. My TypeScript task, which is plaguing me right now, right? So leave these two others out of here, right? Let's go to my gulp task, and notice that there's this big transpile task. Get everything from here, except for the last thing, this connect reload. We're going to get rid of that. So I'm going to copy this whole thing from line 21 to 35 up on GitHub. I'm going to copy this piece, and I'll explain it bit by bit so you understand it. And going back to gulpfile.js, underneath my TypeScript sources, paste it. Okay, and let's go through it so one by one. So I've got my TypeScript sources, and my task is called transpile, right? Transpile. So what it's going to do, it's going to say, when I call my transpile task, I want to log to the console transpiling. Okay. I set up a new variable called TS result, so TypeScript result. And for Gulp, there's two things that are built into Gulp: the source. So when I grab, here's my TypeScript sources. It looks at an array of sources, and the destination of where it's going to go. That's not right. Scripts isn't where it's got to go. It's got to go back into the same place, right? That it's up here, right? But I can't use this necessarily because it's not this whole thing. So I've got to replace scripts with server objects. So just replace it with that. So that's where I'm going to put it for now. So this is where it's going to look as a destination. I also need to do the same thing over here, server objects for this one. I don't need this piece. So I'm going to get rid of this last piece because I don't have a connect server running yet, and press semicolon. Cool. So this is gonna, when I call gulp transpile, it's gonna go out, look at the stuff that I want to transpile, right? As an example, convert it. It's also gonna look inside my my tsconfig.json file. It's gonna look in there, right? And after it looks into my tsconfig.json file and everything else, right? It's going to convert from TypeScript to JavaScript. So this is what it's doing. It's saying each of these modules, when I do a pipe in Gulp, it takes the source and then the pipe sends it, that's what pipe means, sends it to this other module called source maps. Source maps, we loaded in here up here, right? Remember? So we loaded all these modules. And what source maps, the module source maps does is it converts my JavaScript and adds a source map for all my JavaScript files, which is totally needed for TypeScript, for code hinting, and for debugging. And then I call my TSC module, and my TSC module comes from this, TypeScript, Gulp TypeScript. So here's Gulp TypeScript, and TSC has, it's an API that allows me to convert. It's like me calling TypeScript on the command line, like TSC on the command line. But it does it here in Gulp, so I don't have to go to the command line and ever call TSC, right? Then if there's an error, throw it to the console. That's what this does, right? And then what I want to do is I want to take the result, right, of what I've done and place it inside my destination. And I want to return a JavaScript object, so with a JS ending, and I also want to have a source maps that write into the same folder. And if I have an error, I want to pump it out to the command line again. Let's check this task out and see if it works and if it doesn't error out on us. And then we'll take a short break. I'm going to go back to iterm, clear. I want to say gulp transpile. Try this out. And if it works, it's going to go through transpiling and it says finished. Right? Let's take a look at what it generated for us. We're good. It did this piece. Look at server error. Server error and transpile for me. Right? It went from the TypeScript to this piece. Transpile, server error, no problem. So right away, right here. So if you're someone who's using Visual Studio Code, you're good, right? Or if you want to use Sublime now, you can totally transpile here. But I missed one, right? What about this one? What about my app.ts? So that's a problem, right? Because I got my app.ts and I specified only objects. Well, I don't have to do that. I can actually go through, instead of server objects, I can look at everything under server, right? And let's do that, because that's where a lot of my files are going to be. So I'm going to go back to Gulp file and just specify, instead of server objects, right, everything under server is what I want to look at. Right? Same thing with here, and same thing with here. Cool. All right. Let's call that transpile function again. Right. So save everything, go back out here, and then gulp transpile. Go out there, check everything else, and whoa, I got some errors. And here are the errors that you're going to get sometimes. You're going to get some funky stuff going on where it's going to show you the errors on stuff. It says, hey, does not exist on type error. TypeScript error, server app.ts, error property. Remember that error we left? That static, the status? Status does not exist, and that's what I'm getting here. I'm getting an error on my app.ts file because it doesn't exist. So let's fix it. Let's go back to my app.ts. And notice that it did transpile anyway, right? Even though it gave you an error, it gave you an app.js file and an app.js.map, right? Which is kind of cool. But in my app.ts file, I have an error. And the error is this status 4404, right? Now, if I've done things correctly, and by the way, I may have not done things correctly, just FYI, right? Because I'm coding by hand here, by eye, right? Let's just say that I want to create a 404 error, and I want to create this new error, but I don't want it to be error, right? I don't want that to be that. I want to, what I want is I want to pass through a new error of my type of error, which is objects.server error, right? So let's try this. So objects dot, and I'm not getting the code hinting for objects. Ooh, how about objects? If I spell objects correctly, objects dot server error. Take a look that I get that now, right? Because I've got that. And what it says is, whoa, dude, right? It says supply parameters do not match any signature of call target. Yeah, of course it doesn't. Because in my server error, did I ask for any constructor? If I hover over this, it says, hey, there's a duplicate, server error. It exists. Don't worry about what that is. It's something else. right? But in here, in my constructor, I want a string, right? Which is, if I go back to my app.but.ts for a second, right? This is a little string for error, right? That is an input string or some kind of output string, not found. That's what the output string is, right? So let's go back to my custom error and going to call that thing output string. So I'm going to call this output string, which is of type string, just to fix up my class. And I'm going to pass output string into my superclass, which is one of the call signatures if I want. Now I'm forcing it to happen now. This is a requirement now. Okay, cool. I've done that. I got to go back to my app.ts as an example, and I've got to transpile, or else it's always going to say this because it doesn't understand anything because I haven't transpiled. So let's try this out. So go back in here and go up and transpile again. I'm going to get this big error again. Don't worry about that because we're going to fix it. Go back to this, and I still don't get that. Objects.server error, right? So that's what I want to try and do. And server error is what I want to try and put together. And there isn't a call target that says not found, right? This, though, see how I'm not getting an error anymore, but because it doesn't understand what my objects.server is. Any suggestions? So I know a way of fixing this problem, but it's ugly. And I want to make it beautiful for you guys. So I can be the superhero professor that always gets it right, right? Fortunately, I didn't get it right this time, but it's okay. I knew I was running into some problems when I saw this the first time. So what could I do? Well, here's something that I could totally do, right? I could forget about objects and write it inline, right? So I could do something like this. I could say something like, you know, class, right here, class error, like my custom error, right, extends, right, the error class. I could do this. This is kind of a, you know, quick and dirty kind of thing, right? And my custom error, I'm not even going to have a constructor, right, for custom error. All it's going to do is have a status. So watch this. So go back over here and go custom error, right? And if I wanted to see what type that is, by the way, if I go error, that's what it is. I'm actually hitting up an error. If I look to see what this constructor is, it's message, which is a type string, and it's optional. An optional message is type string. So I want to match up what this is, and plus 3 more overloads, it says. There's a bunch of other kinds of overloads, right? So if I start typing a new error, if I want to kind of do the same thing, so var my error, just bear with me so I can show you what I'm talking about here. If I want to recreate this error, notice that I have 3 overloads. A message, right? That's one of the overloads, which is strings. There's all these strings, and there's different kinds of errors. Those are the 3 overloads. Okay, cool. So I just have to give in an optional message, which is a string. So the question mark says it's an optional, right? Let's try that out. So in my constructor, then I can ask for a message, which is an optional string, right? That's what I want. And my optional message string is going to be sent to my super, right, message. And that satisfies my requirements, you see? I'm writing it inline, so I'm not even using this object, okay? Okay, now I can add in this special status, right? The status is a 404. Well, it's a number, right? 404. So I can say, well, you know what? Status exists. It is a public number, which is called status. Public status, which is a type number, right? It exists. There it is, right? And now notice that it says status is not exist in type error. Well, I'm not going to use type error. I'm going to use type, hopefully this worked now, custom error, right? See how status goes away? Because status does exist. I just made it. It's just a container to hold my status. That's all it is. So that makes the error go away. Anyone not understand what I just did? It's a quick and dirty, right? That means I don't need this objects folder right now because my objects don't work, and that means that this require is gone. So let's just do it like this for now, and I'll fix it another day, right? So I don't want to confuse you more than I've already confused the crap out of you all. So here we go. Get rid of it. There we go. Okay, so that's cool. So that makes that work. So all I've done is I've written an inline class right here. That basically what it does is when I transpile, it's a little anonymous or a closure that I'm using, a little class that I'm using just to satisfy these requirements, these 404. And now I know it'll transpile, right? So I'll save everything. I'll go back out here, right? And I'll come up and I'll do transpile, right? And now when it transpiles, we're good to go. Okay? So the transpilation works, and it says worked after 1.18 seconds. Take a look at this. If I go to my app.js now, here's my app.js, I get this extends function at the top of my class because I've used it in my class description. And here's my little custom error. Here's my custom error that I kind of injected in here, right? I put it in here. Now I could put this anywhere, but the right place to probably put this is at the top of my file or instead of another file. That's what I want to try. That's what I want to try and do with you because this doesn't make any sense to me, right? But I want to show you how to transpile. That's the whole thing. Okay, so transpilation works. That's one piece. Let's test it because you know what? We haven't even tried this stuff out. So I'm going to go in here and press clear and go nodemon. Let's try nodemon out, and we're going to serve it up on port 3000 most likely. Let's go back over here and go to localhost 3000. There we go, and press enter, and yay, we got Express. Right, so we got this good. But here's the problem. I have to always reload my server every time, right? Every time I make a change. I mean, I could run nodemon like I'm doing, but nodemon is kind of like a task runner, right? So we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to incorporate, some kind of task runner that reloads my server every time I make a change. So I want to do that without calling nodemon. I want to have my own watch task. Okay? Let's go, and when we come back, we'll do that.